So one of the things we were talking about earlier was about how you as a carer can be supportive of people, either in terms of the kind of the work they're working through with therapist counsel or generally their healthy habits. I mean, was there some particular kind of thoughts or ideas you'd had about?
Yeah, if we think about the period when the person has started to maybe take the medication or is getting initial counselling support, you should see some lifting of the mood, some calming of the anxiety. Not always, and sometimes it takes longer for certain individuals rather than others. But after a period of time, things will start to be a little bit better. There'll be patches of things being bad and a little bit of one step back and 3 steps forward. So there's always that. I think the key role for the carer to some extent can be to do with being supportively vigilant.
Okay.
Yeah, looking out for those signs that someone is ready to do something that in the recent past they've not shown an interest in, like saying maybe we could go and visit the grandchildren today, for example. Now, the tricky part is you might not feel like doing that, and that's okay. And clearly, you can't drop everything to synchronise with a person who's suffering from anxiety or depression. But if you remind yourself that at some point during the week, your loved one is going to ask you to do something or show some indication that they're ready to do something that they weren't previously wanting to do, that you kind of, if you can, and if you can't, that's okay, but if you can, just be ready to say, yeah, you know what, I wasn't planning on doing that, but that's a very good idea, let's do that. Okay. Just to build on those signals that the individual is ready. As we said previously, sometimes the individual doesn't want to do things, and you have a role to some extent about encouraging them. Say, but are you sure? Maybe we could try it a little bit. But if they suggest something, you can build on that. Strike while the iron is hot.
One thing I've come across is doing an activity with that person. As you said, so if someone's trying to eat differently or eat healthier, says, okay, well, we'll eat healthily together. I've got a friend and their partner has quite a lot of problems with alcohol, so there'll be periods where they don't allow any alcohol in the house. So the fact that actually none of their social activities will be around alcohol, they won't have alcohol at the house. So going to the gym together, going for a walk together.
If you can pull that off, that's really powerful. It's powerful because it sends a clear signal to the troubled person that you're on their side and you're prepared to commit to their recovery as well. So it's a sign about support. But secondly, it's also a way of making the stakes just a little bit higher and the rewards a little bit higher. If the individual is doing the dietary management on their own, they know, in a sense, that if they decide to have extra snacks or extra salt or having processed food when they shouldn't, if they do that, they're only affecting themselves. Whereas if it's a joint enterprise, they're kind of making a decision for both of them to some extent. That person will have broken the pact. Equally, if they do stick with it, then both parties are benefiting, and they will have kind of shown some leadership by saying, yeah, that thing we committed to, we're going to stick at it this week. It gives them a sense of agency over themselves and over that part of the relationship upon which you have both agreed. So it is a good thing.
And it's something I've come across with exercise, that there's I've certainly come across some research around the impact of exercise in terms of kind of people's mental health as well as their physical health. But often people tend to put on a huge plateau and think, oh, that's a big thing, that involves going to the gym, doing something intensive, the personal trainer, whereas actually a short walk around the park or even just getting out the house and walking to the corner shop or not using the lift for a couple of floors can be quite small bits, and it's much easier if someone else is with you doing those things rather than just on your own.
Oh, absolutely. Walking in particular is something I recommend to my clients from a very early stage. When I speak to people who are suffering from depression, they'll say, yeah, I do some things, like I walk the dog or I walk down to the library every second Tuesday. And I say, well, that's good, but is there any way you think you might be able to do a little bit more? And we'll negotiate around them doing something. One of the key things is the client has to see themselves doing something different from the norm. Right? They need to be able to monitor themselves, doing a bit more. They can see themselves taking control of their lives just a little bit more but it is a bit more. Now, in that context, if they can do the walking with or without the dog, with a partner, it does make it more enjoyable. It means they're more likely to do it. It means that if at the last minute they decide, oh, you know what, I don't fancy it, it's a little bit more difficult to not do it if it means two of you not doing it. So it is good to be able to do it that way. So the key thing for people who are depressed is to try and help them be more active. That's one of the key things. And if you can get there by making it a team sport, that's great. For people suffering from anxiety, activity can be an issue, but it's about helping them deal with the preoccupation, that constant rumination about what if that happens, what if I can't get there in time, what if the boss is in a bad mood that day, what will I do? And it multiplies very significantly.
So what can a carer do if someone's in those kind of thought cycles? Or?
Yeah, the key thing is to give them a chance to engage in an activity that will capture their attention.
Okay.
And to therefore something interesting, not necessarily something novel, but that can help. But to get them into activities, and if they are activities the two of you can do together, that's great. A good example is if you're in a relationship and you're the person who normally looks after the garden, to invite the person to take on some little job in the garden with you. Yeah. Now that'll be different for them, so they'll ask you questions, they'll be thinking about it, trying to do a good job, and that'll be great. Equally, if you're the person who normally does most of the housework, you can invite them to take on a little bit of the responsibility on a particular day as a one-off, it doesn't matter, just to get them in some other activity. Because we know that individuals who become inactive when they are suffering from anxiety will fill that time with rumination and preoccupation.
Rather than kind of activity.
And rather activity. So the activity is good because it's physically healthy. It helps them just clear their head and have a bit of a walk, think about what's happening around them. But it's also powerful because it tends to stop them from ruminating quite so much. And we'll talk about this later perhaps, but one of the key things about people suffering from generalised anxiety disorder or any kind of severe anxiety is that they start to become upset not about the specific issue or issues that might be troubling them. They start to become very worried about the way in which they are worrying all the time. Okay. They feel handcuffed to anxiety, handcuffed to worrying. And one of their beliefs that drives that is they believe that worrying is uncontrollable. Yeah? Well, this is where carers can come in and help. One of the key things which counsellors will try with a person who's suffering from anxiety is to say, part of the thing that's holding you back is your belief that your rumination is uncontrollable. Because people suffering from anxiety often do one of two things, neither of which work. One thing they do is to try and just ignore the thing that's troubling them and try and not think about it.
Try and put it out there.
Put it out of mind.
Okay.
Probably it will pop back up again, right? It just does, because you've not processed it in a different way, it'll just come back. The other way is to try and analyse it to death by embracing it. And a lot of high-functioning people suffering from anxiety think, this is just another problem I've got, I'll think through what it is, but all they do is think about what if, and these chains become more and more remote and fantastical. It doesn't help at all. The trick is, and this is where the care comes, the trick is to try a little experiment, which is to say, right, I'm worried about what happens if I don't get that promotion at work next week. But I'm not going to worry about it now. I'm going to worry about it at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. So you intently postpone the worrying.
Okay.
And it's very powerful. Lots of research shows this technique is very powerful. And the carer here, when they hear the anxious person engaging in this conversation about, oh my goodness, what am I going to do if I don't get that promotion at work? What if they make cutbacks the week after that? What if I'm the person who seems to be not up to the mark here, and so on. But look, don't worry about it right now. Postpone it and promise yourself you're going to worry about it at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. Let's do something active now instead of worrying about it. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to 6 o'clock the next evening, one of a few things will happen. First of all, the person completely forgets to worry about it. What does that show you? The second possibility is the person says, well, yeah, I would like to get promoted, but frankly, I don't feel as worried about it as I did yesterday, so that's okay. Or thirdly, you know what, I've set in the application form, I'm going to have the standard interview. There's not a lot I can do about the outcome. I'll do my best and that's that. So it's not something I can do anything about right now. Or you say, well, actually, this is a situation where I've got to sit down and try and solve that problem systematically, not just chase through what ifs, but think, what is actually the problem here? What specifically am I worried about? How do I nail that down? So, we can talk more about those techniques separately, but the point here is you're absolutely right. Activity is important for helping someone who's suffering from mental illness challenges, but often for different reasons for different types of people. If you're depressed, it's just breaking the chain of inactivity and self-esteem reduction and guilt and just feeling alienated from the world around them, a lack of control and influence, just breaking through that with activity. The physical work is good, but it's just being able to get out and do things which the person may previously have enjoyed. If you can do that with them, that's brilliant. For people who are anxious, all of those things are true as well, but specifically, in order to help them postpone their worrying, which is a core technique in supporting people suffering from anxiety, you can replace the worry time with walking time.
Okay. Or
badminton time, or walk the dog's time, or fix that set of leaves in the garden time. It doesn't matter.
And one of the interesting things as well, and I've got a couple of friends who have anxiety, and although sometimes it's physical activity, actually even activity that's not necessarily physical. So one of them's a very keen painter. So we'll say, actually, well, let's do some craft time together, let's do some painting together, or board games, or something where it's an activity that takes the mind off it. Doesn't necessarily involve some physical activity, but as you said, it can interrupt those space. So even board games is quite an issue. Cooking, arts, crafts, so something like that can be really
absolutely helpful. Any sort of activity in the broadest sense can be beneficial. The only thing you've got to be careful of is people, when they're under pressure and if they choose an activity, it's often an activity they're very good at, and they're sometimes able to go into automatic pilot, and that creates space for worrying. So this is a tricky one to handle sometimes, but there are people who are very good at
knitting, I suppose.
Sorry?
Knitting can be one where you can do it, but actually it's not taking that much of a conscious activity, so you've got a huge amount of space.
Absolutely. And also find video games. A lot of young people say they take their mind off things by playing video games, and video games are a whole different conversation, and they vary a lot of different types, but there's a danger because of the automaticity of the reactions, their mind drifts back to the thing we're worrying about. So what do? It's an open door if the person wants to do something they kind of enjoy. But so what I try and say to some of my clients is there someone with you that you can try and show the skills that you have in that area? So you wouldn't call it teaching, but just to share. So for example, if you're a carer and you have someone who's suffering from anxiety, it might be interesting and helpful for you and them if, like your friend, instead of saying, why don't you go and do some painting? That might be enough, but it could be, I've always wanted to learn how you draw flowers. Could you just sit down and show me how to draw flowers? Because the cognitive, the intellectual, the artistic imagination and effort required by that person to show you how to paint flowers is going to be much more helpfully distracting than them doing doing it on their own.
And interesting with video games, I've found two strategies that can sometimes be helpful. So one is there's a lot of video games where they have a cooperative element. So rather than it just be one person on their own doing that automatic, the fact that the two of you and you might be talking and exchanging, it can be distracting. And the other one is, as you said, saying, could you explain how are you doing this? I'm interested in this game. Could you explain to me how it works? Talk me through your strategy. And suddenly that's a lot more, there's a lot more of a cognitive load there, as you said.
Absolutely. And it has the secondary effect of bringing you and the person you're caring for together. And if it's an activity that you don't normally get involved in, it kind of gives you a little window into their world as well. Maybe you never had any interest in painting, but the person you love who's currently going through a difficult time, just to sit with them, to enjoy them showing you the thing that really has made them happy in the past, is a very special experience for you. And it's to be cherished on its own merits in that regard too.
And so it can actually be really good quality relationship.
Of course, absolutely. Absolutely. It's an interesting one because when you talk to couples and you ask them, how did you first meet? It's something like, well, we were both into dancing or we're both into rock climbing. And that's all great. But I think it comes to the point where if a couple explores a new activity, well, one of them is slightly more expert than the other. And if you manage it properly, that asymmetry seems to keep a balance in the way that if they're both at the same level, there's no reason why they can't enjoy it if they're both exceptionally good tennis players. But one being a little bit better than the other opens up that opportunity for the dialogue, and the dialogue is powerful if it's a helpful one.
I hope you found this course helpful. At FCC, we're committed to providing courses and training for unpaid carers, and these courses are completely free. If you found this helpful, you could support our work in 3 ways. Please recommend it to any friends or people that you know that will benefit from the courses. Please consider sharing it on social media. And if you can, please consider donating. There are buttons on the website where you can donate £1, £2, £5, and every pound that you donate will make a huge difference by helping us make more and more care courses completely free to carers. Thank you very much.